There are no complaints about the corrosion resistance of the Troika body. The passive safety of the model is also high and has a maximum of 5 stars according to the results of Euro NCAP crash tests conducted in 2005. Typical problems: problems with front optics washers, fogging of front optics, post-restyling versions, and central locking failures. After replacement it works without failures. All units of the Troika are distinguished by high power and good dynamics. The most popular 2.0-liter petrol versions with mechanics accelerate to the first 100 in 9.0 seconds. By the way, during restyling in 2008, many engines were modernized and their power increased. However, it is the engines of the 3s that can present the most surprises. Thus, in 4-cylinder units, after 100,000 kilometers, valve seals fail, which causes oil consumption to increase, up to 1 liter per 1,000 kilometers. By the way, all engines are deprived of the traditional mechanical dipstick for monitoring the lubricant level in the motor. Instead, an electrical sensor is used, which begins to lie over time. Operating the motor with insufficient lubrication will damage it. In the same 4-cylinder engines, the oil pan gasket leaks over time. The new design of the Valvetronic variable valve timing mechanism is also not durable. After 100,000 kilometers it may become unusable. However, owners do not always notice the problem that has arisen, since it does not particularly change the traction characteristics. By the way, after replacement the new mechanism works well. The manufacturer has modernized it. In 6-cylinder engines, after 80,000 kilometers, the electrically driven pump often fails. A typical problem with all gasoline units is the failure of individual ignition coils. I have good news for you. Now, if you are planning to buy a used car, or learn more about your car, you no longer need to search for the information you need on the internet. We have collected everything in one place for you, on the website carme.pro. Here you can find out everything about the car, what brakes and at what mileage, any problems with engines, chassis or gearboxes, which trim levels are better not to mess with, and how not to lose money buying a used car. You will learn all this on carme.pro. Diesel versions imported gray are usually equipped with a particulate filter. When using our diesel fuel, the filter wears out intensively, which negatively affects the traction characteristics of the car. After 200,000 kilometers, problems with turbines are possible. Most 3s are traditionally equipped with a rear-wheel drive transmission. There are also all-wheel drive versions 9 and XD, which are less common. Unlike its predecessor with a mechanical center differential, the E90 is equipped with an X-drive system with an electronically controlled multi-plate clutch. Under normal conditions, it redistributes torque in a ratio of 40 to 60, front/rear axles, and when wheels slip, from 50 to 50 to 0 to 100. The Troika's all-wheel drive is aimed at increasing the vehicle's stability in difficult road conditions. Mechanics consider the 9 and XD versions to be reliable, although they advise monitoring the integrity of the anthers of the front grenades. If used carelessly, they can be damaged, which will damage the CV joint, which can only be replaced as an assembly with the axle shaft. Many cars are equipped with a Tiptronic automatic transmission with the ability to manually change gears. Versions with mechanics are reliable, but they are much less common. But the automatic can create problems. Thus, in an automatic transmission, after 80 to 100,000 kilometers, a loss of tightness was noted in the bushing of the electrical connector for connecting the brain, the ECU. After 100,000 kilometers, the automatic transmission suffers from hard shocks when changing gears. In some cases, replacing the lubricant helps, although, according to the manufacturer's recommendations, it is designed for the entire service life of the machine. The Troika's compact and moderately stiff chassis perfectly matches the driver's character of the model. High stability is supported by a range of active safety systems: dynamic stability control, DSC, dynamic brake control, DBC, traction control, DTC, and cornering brake control, CBC. Both suspensions are independent, front double wishbone, rear multi-link, with anti-roll bars. To reduce unsprung weight, all front and rear wishbones are made of aluminum alloy. The E90 chassis is more durable than the suspension of its predecessor in the E46 body. Thus, the silent blocks of the upper front arms are capable of withstanding a mileage of 100,000 kilometers, the lower ones about 150,000 kilometers, the struts of both stabilizers 100 to 120,000 kilometers, their bushings 150,000 kilometers, and the ball joints and most rear multi-link levers, about 200,000 kilometers. The only weak point of the Troika chassis can be called the floating silent blocks of the rear wishbones. They last 70 to 80,000 kilometers. A malfunction is indicated by a characteristic squeak when driving over uneven surfaces. The cost of repairing the chassis is increased by the fact that most of the consumables are supplied together with the levers, with the exception of silent blocks of the front upper control arms and rear transverse control arms. The steering is informative on all threes. Depending on the configuration, it could be with conventional power steering or with a degree of gain that varied depending on the speed of movement. On our roads, the rack quickly brakes and can knock slightly after 50,000 kilometers. However, mechanics claim that you can drive with such a problem for a long time and quite safely. Steering rods last about 100,000 kilometers, and the tips last only 20,000 kilometers longer, so it is recommended to change them at the same time as an assembly. The disc brake system is very effective, but can present an unpleasant surprise. So, after 80,000 kilometers, the vacuum brake booster pump driven by the engine camshaft may fail. First, lubricant begins to leak from under it, and after 1 to 1.5 years the effectiveness of the reinforcement decreases. The part needs to be replaced. Even used BMW 3 Series E90 can give pleasure from fast driving, precise handling and good stability for a rear-wheel drive car. Despite its premium status, the Troika, like other equipment, can break down. Domestic mechanics make their main complaints about motors. These are where the most typical problems have been identified. Other problems will not particularly spoil the impression of owning this model.